not have the, we want to make sure everyone was briefed and had a significant understanding of what we were doing moving forward. So,
Good afternoon, Commission. I'm sure you're well aware data centers have been a major hot topic
in many localities in the state. Virginia actually has the largest concentration of data centers in the world. The purpose of this is kind of a who, what, I'm sorry? I think that's more. Virginia does have the largest concentration of data centers in the world. We do want to give you a kind of who, what, why, when, and where of data centers and their impacts from a land use perspective. Can you hear me better? Or am I still coming in? Okay. All right, so today we're going to discuss the different data center types, various impacts to the community, recent Virginia legislation, data centers that we have in Norfolk, as well as other locality action, and then some future considerations as far as data centers in Norfolk. I'll reference this several times, but not all data centers are the same. Public perception is a large, several hundred thousand square foot facility. That's not always the case. Some can be a large room in a hospital. So there's a wide variety as far as the size and scale. It does make it challenging from a regulatory standpoint because it's kind of where's that line between, what can cause impacts and what is fine and can assimilate with the community. So what is a data center? A data center is a facility that uses to store and house IT infrastructure. This can include servers, firewalls, cloud applications, AI models, as well as other software and hardware components. This is not to be confused with an energy storage facility. Data centers don't store energy, they just use a lot of it. There can be one of four types, edge or modular, colocation, enterprise, or hyperscale. I'll talk about those in detail in the next couple slides. Most people are unaware, but Norfolk does have two small co-location facilities. We define these as office per the ordinance, and these have little to no impacts on the surrounding properties. The first type is they're similar but different same time, edge and modular. These consist of smaller data centers located in close proximity to the related business or user. These allows for users to scale based on demand. It can be temporarily positioned to meet project needs. You probably won't hear too much about these. There's a lot of these used to support Internet of Things and content delivery. Staff does not have any major concerns. These are temporary in nature. Next type is co-location. This is one of the most common types you'll see. Think of these as a self-storage unit. They provide shared spaces for businesses to store and manage IT operations, and these are ran by a third party, not the individual users inside. Typically used for power, cooling, technical support, security, and space for IT infrastructure. Some of the advantages include lower operational costs versus in-house and scalability. The size can vary, but usually typically less than 20,000 square feet. Next type are enterprise. These are private facilities owned and operated by a single organization. So instead of the co-location where you have multiple users ran by a third party, these are owned and operated by one party, one user. Typically located near or on site and allows the ability to the user to scale and tailor the size and specifics of the operation based on their need. Common users of this are banks, universities, and hospitals. The size can range from a large room to a 40,000 square foot building. With this type, some of these can be on their larger side. This is kind of when we start to feel the impacts from a land use perspective. The picture on the right, that is actually the data center from the University of Utah. They have their own enterprise data center where they keep their servers and other hardware components. So these are what people think of when they hear the word data center. These are the hyperscale data centers. These are colossal, can be single or multi-tenant centers for housing and managing IT operations. Usually this is a single user. Buildings can be one or multiple, in excess of 200,000 square feet, and can utilize 10 to 50 acres of land. Typically, they're going to require the 60 megawatt or more of power capacity, and they do need to be located near a substation or transmission lines. AI campus is a term you might have heard or hear of. These are the massive hyperscale facilities that really are specific to AI, running AI models. These consume a ton of power and take up a lot of space. Based on the impacts, these particular types, regards to noise, water consumption, environmental factors, and energy consumption, staff does have concerns if these were to be in Norfolk. Obviously, with the amount of land we have, it's unlikely, but it's something we do need to plan for in the future. Go ahead.
So when you say Virginia has the most, is it most of these or is it the sum of all?
It's a sum of all of them. Yeah. Yeah, these
These
are
are
definitely one of the fastest growing types, but due to AI and kind of how technology's going, but that's a mixture of all the types. Yeah. All right, some more information on data centers. They're based on a 4-tier classification system. Tier 4 has the highest redundancy and uptime. So the higher the tier, generally the higher the noise and energy consumption as well. So for example, a Tier 4 system or data center is required to be functional 99.995% of the year. That's about 26 minutes of downtime a year. So obviously you increase the tier, you increase cost. Different users have different needs. So a government organization, cybersecurity probably needs a top 4, or, kind of goes down from there. All right, several impacts from data centers, both positive and negative. Environmental impacts include greenhouse gases from the backup generators, as well as large land usage you can see from the hyperscale facilities. Data centers do need water for cooling. Some of these systems have improved over the past couple years. Facilities don't always need as much water, and they can recycle for a more efficient system. Cooling does account for about 40% of the power consumption used, though. Energy consumption, I'll discuss on the next slide. Noise, this is probably what you're going to hear about from nearby residents. One of the biggest impacts, mainly from the cooling fans, creates a constant low-frequency hum or rumble, which a lot of times is not noticeable during the day, but only at night. Like I said, this is one of the biggest concerns raised by communities. Usually, you're going to hear about 60 to 80 decibels. Sometimes it'll be at the property line of the data center, sometimes it's not. 68 decibels is roughly your washing machine going or TV to moderate volume. And again, this can really vary. Some centers you won't hear anything, some you'll hear in that range. So it really just kind of depends on the operation. Employment numbers, as you can probably guess, aren't significantly high. Most employment is generated during the construction phase. Once it's fully built out, expect around 15 to 25 for your hyperscale facilities, and then the 5 to 15 range for your smaller co-location facilities. Data centers do contribute to the tax base and can attract new companies, as most companies do want to be near the data center that they use, and there is no significant impact to schools or roads. That is one positive. All right, this is the average daily power consumption in megawatts. These numbers are extremely vary, so don't put too much emphasis. It's just a really good picture on kind of how the differences that they use based on size. Some of your AI-specific hyperscale facilities can exceed 10,000 megawatts a day. And as you see down at the bottom, typical hyperscale can consume enough power in a day to power over 30,000 single-family homes. That's a lot. Small scale, you're looking at about 5 to 15,000 square feet. Mid-size, you're looking at 20 to 40,000 square feet. And then your hyperscales usually exceed 100,000 square feet. So that's the power consumption in a rough approximate number. All right, recent Virginia legislation. Virginia House Bill 153 was signed into law April this year. This requires a site assessment to be conducted for the high energy use facility data centers. These are data centers that can have a capacity of 100 megawatts or more. So not consumption, but capacity. Any given time, their max capacity will be 100 megawatts. This requires a noise assessment to residential units and schools within 500 feet, as well as an assessment to water, agricultural parks, historic sites, and forest land. This must be conducted by the applicant and does not supersede any local zoning ordinance requirement from that perspective. Another piece of legislation, this was with the budget that was passed, House Bill 30. This is to be overseen by the State Corporation Commission and the Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ. This includes an energy consumption tax of 1 cent per kilowatt, requires the DEQ to define a water scarcity area where data centers would be required to use water-efficient cooling systems. Also authorizes the DEQ to adopt and enforce noise regulations, and also keeps the long-running sales and use tax exemption for data centers in the state. It's been around for quite a few years now. The picture on your right is kind of worth 1,000 words. I don't know the locality, but that is in Northern Virginia. There was an office loophole. I believe it's closed in most counties, but some of your larger scale were allowed to operate by right, being under an office use. So, Things are changing though. Here's a map of all the existing and proposed data centers in the state, large and small. This is all the different types. It's around 650 currently. As you can see, the majority are in the northern part of the state and the I-95 corridor. Most of this is due to the fiber optic network in place and the original energy infrastructure, as well as the tech companies that are in that part of the state as well. The dark red dots, looks like you've probably seen pretty well, they represent the pending data centers, which greatly outnumber the amount of existing facilities. The reason for this is a lot are awaiting power grid improvements, and local ordinance changes are kind of in flux as well, for more oversight and regulations from localities. Here's a map that shows Virginia's power consumption on a countrywide level compared to the rest of the country. And as you can see, we lead the charge in power consumption and facilities. We consume about 24 terawatts a year of power, of watts of power. And like I said, we have around 650 facilities. Yeah, go ahead.
Is that 17?
Correct. 17 terawatts. Yep.
Is that comparison, with the size of the state or the population? Is that factoring?
It's just raw
I mean,
power.
Texas is a great deal larger than.
It's just raw power consumption.
I think you're right, I believe Texas is much larger, and yet we still
Yeah.
consume that much more.
And you wouldn't think that was 650 up at the top, but
Yeah.
if I zoomed in on the top, a couple northern counties, you would just see how many we have up there. So if you've flown into Dulles anytime recently, you can see them.
I just got back from Dulles Airport, and it's just, you can't even believe the corner, it's just one after another, and they are huge, absolutely huge.
It says Virginia's got bigger investment in infrastructure to support it, so.
All right, nearby locality action. In June, Virginia Beach city leaders stated they will not entertain any future large-scale data centers. It's not defined in that city under it's categorized under wholesale, warehousing, storage, and distribution, and it's permitted by right in industrial districts. As you can see on the map, Virginia Beach does have 2 small co-location facilities, and 1 is proposed. City leaders do not oppose these type of facilities, although future restrictions are likely. In these 2 facilities, they have their actual landing sites for the subsea cables. They're transatlantic. I believe they come from Europe and Africa, but they are fiber optic cables that do cross the ocean, and they are landing sites there. In Chesapeake, July, city leaders voted to delay all land use applications related to data centers for 8 months. There, they are currently permitted by right in select business, industrial, office, and institutional districts. And there is a proposal for a text amendment that includes a conditional use permit requirement, mitigation measures related to noise, water usage, and electricity. Chesapeake does not currently have any data centers. And as you can see on this map, we do have 2 small co-location, which I've mentioned several times. I'll discuss those here. So we have 2 Edge Connects and NetTech. They're both co-location. Building size, I couldn't quite get the number. Both of these are in shared office buildings with other tenants that aren't data centers. So the actual size of these data centers is actually much smaller. I'm not sure what that is. And the zoning is BCI and then BCO. And then both are classified as office per the ordinance. And as far as staff is aware, there's no adverse effects of these 2 data centers that we have. You wouldn't even know they were there driving by. For future considerations, I do want to point out the map you see on the right. That is the regional fiber optic ring that is in the final stages of completion. Might be finished, I'm not quite sure. This will connect a fiber optic network from the subsea cable landing sites, Virginia Beach, to the 5 Southside cities. With this, we can definitely expect more demand for data centers in the future. Staff does recommend further examination concerning the future data centers in Norfolk, as well as possible zoning text amendment changes. Kind of define the use and distinguish between the smaller data centers that we have here with no impacts, and then your large hyperscale facilities. Limitations on size, restrictions on data centers to certain districts, conditional use permit requirements, and the creation of performance standards related to noise, screening, water usage, perimeter buffers, and fire prevention. That's all I have. Any questions?
Any questions?
Andrew, I missed it, the regional fiber ring. Is there a, this is first phase of multiple phases?
I believe so. I'm not quite sure the phasing. So,
I mean, that's a good indicator that something might be coming if you start seeing fiber being installed,
Absolutely.
and especially the large capacity.
And there's a regional group that is committed to, all the cities committed to build out this fiber network right now. Norfolk Innovation Corridor is working with this Norfolk fiber network. But yes, this is the current build out that we're doing right now, that all the localities are committed to. But it does connect them to the subsea cables, which go across the transatlantic subsea cables. So it gives, with us being a direct landing point, again, similar to Northern Virginia, it has the potential to be another place where more places that benefit from high-speed data to be located here. It's not just data centers, there's plenty of other things that could be using that, so,
Huge move. That's what Ben Davenport started
yes,
at the beach.
that's right.
It's been
I think we're just waiting on the part of Virginia Beach. I know, I'm almost positive ours is done. It's just a small segment of Virginia Beach we're waiting on. This should be complete.
How are these taxed? What is that? You know, you hear about these huge tax benefits that cities get. What is it based on?
So property tax would be localities tax. I'm not 100% of the taxation of these.
I think it's what's the one on the equipment? What's the one on equipment for a business? Machinery and tools, they get that as well as the local real estate tax from it. And again, because it has low impacts on because the facility has no impacts on roads, no impact on children or students, and they just get the taxes from it.
And the energy consumption tax started recently, or will start very, very soon with the budget.
So the 4 different sizes, are there certain sizes that we are okay with? I mean, because they're minimal impact?
Look at it more as types, because the sizes can really range within the types.
So the modular versus the co-location versus.
Correct.
I mean, those top 2, or the first 2, seems like to me nobody even knows they're there.
Correct. As long as they're within, a size that doesn't.
They're for that facility, they're for that hospital, they're for that.
Same with enterprise, most enterprise facilities aren't that large.
Is that like that too? So those
It
top
can be, but
first 3 probably we know.
again, I hate to say never, but generally if they're not too big, impacts aren't felt too
I
hard.
think determining it based on the usage, which is the state law change, uses the term high energy use facility as the defining point. I think that's probably the easiest way, because that's when you go over to the side where they have multiple diesel generators, and when there's a down in the grid, they'll fire up all the diesel generators to keep it running.
Use the water and all that other.
Water's not as bad. The person that tracks this for what is it, Piedmont environmental group, the water consumption isn't as bad as now as everyone thought it would be because of the changes in technology. What the biggest issue is when they flush the system out, that there might be impacts, but the water consumption isn't as bad as it used to be. It's mostly just the energy usage at this point. So.
I did have a question about that, when you were saying that the 2 that are in Norfolk have a minimal impact, and I wondered, was water included in that?
They're inside office
Yeah.
buildings. One of them we permitted not too long ago. I don't believe there were any requests for updates, and there are no plumbing permits, nothing like that, that would have triggered anything additional, so.
I'm absolutely supportive of being careful about our water usage and all of that, but I also don't want us to ignore the fact that we need to be savvy to attract businesses and have opportunities for businesses to have access to what they need.
I'm so
There
sorry.
seems to be a lot of interest in, and I didn't know if you learned about this or they talked about this, but I've seen that doing data centers that were going to be in the ocean or in space, so I mean, I think this is a rapidly evolving program, and I just want us to not just throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, to keep our eyes on that. I'm sure you already are, but
that's the balancing act that we've had discussing it. I mean, we all enjoy utilizing the comforts of our cell phones that have, even if you just use your cell phone regularly using cloud storage, you're gonna be using this. Might forget using AI. You're using one of these facilities already. So I don't disagree also with the potential for tax base. We just have to make sure the externality impacts are the things that we just focus on.
And it does appear that they're making efforts to minimize the impact on the environment, certainly water and, I just think they are recognizing that there's a huge push against these. I mean, we're seeing it all over the country. So they're gonna adapt to finding ways to make them more acceptable, and it's important, I think, for us to keep abreast of that.
And that's why I asked about the data center, because I saw on the map, in an article that there were 2 in Norfolk, and I was like, really? I didn't know. And this was helpful in giving us the different size and scale and what they do and how large they are. And I imagine, because we're so built up, that we probably wouldn't have the space for a hyperscale facility, I assume. Am I wrong for that?
We've had an inquiry, but there's, other than one inquiry, not really. It is difficult to do a hyperscale. I will say the enterprise ones, they exist now. So any of your research institutions, they have their own enterprise facility because they're running, their stuff is on their server, running their own AI, running their own, yeah.
But it's on their campus, not necessarily like we saw at
Terra Hospital, I'm sure,
Next to
same
us.
thing.
Yeah.
Centera has one, some of the larger banks, they have them as they're running all the other things too. So, yeah, I think the key is gonna be the energy consumption, using that larger definition and external impacts. Because there's a reason why again, these are let in as office, because it's literally just a bunch of computers in the room. So we were impacted, I don't know if you remember when there was that big Bitcoin mining craze that happened about 10 years ago. And that's when we kind of came to the point of understanding, all this cooling that was necessary to run all these computers and the noise impacts and stuff like that, so.
Any other questions? Thank you, I truly appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Well, if the commission wants, we can put, in order for us to continue the work, we can put a initiation for a text amendment, just to continue with the work, or if not, we can pause here. It's up to the commission if you want us to continue to do more research on it. To bring forward to you.
Well, I recognize that there was just the one inquiry, but I would rather be proactive unless, y'all don't think that's prudence.
That especially with the immediacy of Chesapeake working through similar, and they have more open landmass than we do, but I think now's the perfect time.
We recommend just at least updating our definitions so that we're talking about the same thing. Everyone's talking about the same thing and not just, because right now it does, this office loophole, it falls under office in our current zoning ordinance, so we just have to be aware. So, yeah, we'll bring that forward as initiation at the end of the month, so we can continue the work.
Yeah, it's good question. As far as what's the potential for locations that maybe I'm not aware of? I know in the news that the Globe Iron looked like that was a pretty big structure, a pretty big landmass there that could have been converted to something like that. But it'd be helpful for us to know what's the risk, I guess, or what are the potential spaces that one of the larger data centers might come into. And not that we want to publicize that, I guess, but I think have our language come around and to Jake's point, really kind of be intentional about getting something on the books. So if we get a request and the land is there and the owner wants to sell it and everything aligns, we've got something that we can lean on.
We'll make sure to bring that back. It'll probably be best instead of only honing in on a couple properties. We don't want to turn it into a pitch, right? But we'll grab the zoning districts that have parcels of that size and in that range of sizes, and we can provide that. So,
Is it worth having the discussion with economic development too, as we're working through this and trying to understand that we're not competing priorities?
yep, that'll be part of the discussion too.
How many areas like about right can the data center, no matter what type, can go into? So anything that's labeled office is
Essentially, right now, I think it falls under the definition of office, so it could be in any commercial, industrial zoning district, the industrial parks.
And that's any of those 4 types could, in theory, or?
In theory, we've said that if you fall, most of them are looking at larger industrial sites, so we've said if you have external impact, there is a call out in zoning ordinance that if there's an external noise impact, if you're within 600 feet of residential, we're holding them to say that you need to have a CUP for that. It's a little bit of a stretch at the moment, but we're trying to make sure that we're being diligent about understanding the impact. So that's why we believe we need to come in and just shift around some definitions, put them in the right spot, and then bring it forward.
Very good.
Thank you, guys.
This has the industrial mixed use zoning district. Commissioners, if you remember, we had informed you of a meeting in the Chelsea industrial area, Chelsea business area, I should say, that kind of kicked off a discussion about potential additional uses on industrially zoned land. Chris is going to provide you kind of an update of where we landed from that discussion in there, and kind of the direction we believe we should continue to move forward, and probably have an initiation of that at this point. No, it's already initiated. You already initiated. This is just going to give you the summary. So.
All right, thanks, Bobby. Good afternoon, commissioners. This is going to be, as Bobby mentioned, this is on your August 27th public hearing agenda, initiated last month to create a new zoning overlay district, and then as part of that, we also mentioned the rezoning of one or more properties to basically apply that new overlay district. So these are the 2 items on the agenda to create that overlay, which is called the industrial mixed use overlay district, and then the change of zoning at one particular property at 1311 Redgate Avenue, which is currently zoned light industrial, to also apply that overlay district on top of that. So some quick background. And I'll just mention that this overlay district is really meant as an incremental kind of compatibility focused tool, not a total transformation of industrial districts or anything like that. But you'll see kind of in the next couple of slides what this entails and kind of how we see this as that incremental tool. So just to kind of get to the origin of it, we had some interest from the Chelsea Business Association earlier in the year, and they, basically wanted us to explore what additional commercial uses could be, could work in that district. And, as we all know, there is already a healthy mix of uses there. Just, in that area specifically, even though it's zoned primarily industrial, there's a few commercially zoned districts there or properties there, but mainly it's either, deep waterfront industrial or light industrial there. But light industrial does allow for quite a number of commercial uses. Some of them are conditional use permitted, some of them are by right, but there are some things that are not allowed at all, not even by conditional use permit. So they wanted us to kind of take a look at that and see if there was commercial uses that might be appropriate. And then, what kind of came out more specifically was more retail goods and personal service businesses, both of which are not permitted at all in the IL district. So as Bobby mentioned, we had a community meeting. So we, with taking that, we kind of looked at some things on our own as well beforehand. But we knew that we really needed to kick this off with a community meeting because there's a lot of different stakeholders there just in that one small area, with the industrial users, commercial users, various property owners, the residents, whether they're in Chelsea or West Kent. There's just a lot of stakeholders really in that area that we wanted to try to bring to the table. So we had the meeting on June 29th in Chelsea to gather the feedback, and basically we just asked 2 questions: what current uses they enjoy in the area, what are the things you just enjoy right now, what do you partake in, and what uses would you like to add to the area. So that was kind of our way of trying to get a feel for what they like about the area, not just the land uses, but sort of the atmosphere and the vibe of the area. And then more specifically, what kinds of commercial uses they'd like to see there. And so the themes, the major themes I would say that came out of that are what you see here. They really echo these kind of themes of the existing walkability of the area. You know, it's been like that for quite a long time. We wanted to, kind of retain that and that mixture of uses, just that overall, again, the character and vibe that it has had for some time now, just organically, really. But they did want, I think we did hear pretty strongly that the industrial character of that area, whether it's the physical structures of the building or some of the existing employers there, they're very, very much would like to see that be retained. Not this total transformational kind of change that that would push anyone out or make it completely commercial. So it was trying to balance these two things. Came out pretty strongly, and then again, we heard very strongly that this kind of idea of more small scale retail was preferred. Not just kind of opening the door completely and just allowing anything in, but really the small scale kind of boutique retail and other service uses like barbershops and salons and things like that. But to try to figure out what that box or boundary looks like for those particular uses that support those employers I mentioned, and provide kind of that these commercial opportunity for residents and businesses in that area, but that didn't tip the scales too far in that direction. And then finally, that the parking there currently, there's quite a bit of there's off-lot parking. Of course, it's privately owned, and then there is quite a bit of on-street parking as well. But with this mixture of industrial truck traffic, residential uses very close by, and then of course all the commercial in between. Just there's this concern about what the traffic impacts could be and kind of the impact and the demand on the existing street networks, and so just trying to manage that and try to figure out a way to balance those different interests. So we took that feedback back, and we've had multiple meetings as staff, and came up with there's a lot of ways, there's a lot of ways you can do this in the zoning ordinance, and we probably went back and forth between a lot of different options, but we really landed on ultimately this overlay district. And actually, it's the way that this one would work is that it's actually not Chelsea specific. That's where this conversation started. And but we actually, as a staff, also have for some time now. We've actually been working, kind of sort of on our internal work program. We've been on our radar. We would like to revisit the industrial districts in general. So we've kind of had a very similar sort of idea in our minds to kind of look at how to, especially with the light industrial areas or the districts, how might some of this a mixture like you're about to see, how could that work? What does that look like? And then just in general, some industrial zoning kind of a project where we look at all of our industrial districts, very much in line with what Andrew just presented. On data centers, there's a lot of just uses and definitions and things like that we want to take a look at and make sure we're set up for the future. So this was actually really good timing for us too, because we kind of combined that with what we heard from the community, and this district can be applied anywhere in the city. It's not just Chelsea specific. It's what we like to call these floating districts. So we create them in the zoning ordinance, and then it doesn't, except for this one particular property in this request, we aren't rezoning a bunch of properties immediately as part of this. It's the property owners will have to opt into the overlay district. So in the future, if this is created, then we can. It just provides that option for property owners to voluntarily change that zoning. And then so that's why it's called floating. So it exists in the ordinance. It's there for it's an option, but we still have to go out and actually implement the district. And then it's really areas where the idea with it is it's where these light industrial areas can coexist with that small scale commercial within existing buildings. That's the other key, is that it's only meant for applying on properties with existing buildings, not for new construction. So again, these thinking of places like Chelsea or maybe the Railroad District that have existing buildings, some of which could be historic. So in some fashion, it can be used as an adaptive reuse tool. But again, that's the main kind of point is to recognize those existing kind of districts and try to provide this kind of additional opportunity here. So as far as the strict eligibility requirements, the property has to be zoned IL, so the base zoning district must be IL. That's the first one. And then to try to get at the parking management concern and some of the capacity concerns that we heard, The other issue or the requirement for a property is that if they do rezone to this district, each existing building on that site must be able to provide one parking space per 850 square feet. So just, whatever that number comes out to be, they have to show that they have that on their site at a minimum. And that 850 square feet is the parking requirement for general industrial uses in our industrial districts. So that's where the number came from. The idea being we trying to provide some parking on site, and they're not allowed to use the exemptions that we currently have in that parking chapter. So kind of requiring some parking on the property to try to mitigate some of those concerns we heard, and just the general nature of a lot of IL districts are right next to residential neighborhoods or commercial districts, what have you. But also not being too onerous and recognizing these are mixed-use walkable districts, and we don't want to require a lot of parking. Like, for example, the commercial parking requirement would require more parking if we did that. So we thought that was a good balance, between those different interests.
Just for reference, commercial parking would be more than double this requirement. So I just want to make sure it's in the traditional district is one parking space per 300 square feet. This is one per 850, which is the base industrial zoning. So not trying to be onerous on the property. We just, again, as Chris said, we just want to make sure it has something so that we don't have people on top of each other.
And I think the sort of crux of this one is that the retail, so currently, the only change at this moment, we kind of wanted to get this started. We know there's a greater conversation to be had. Like I mentioned, we've as a team, we've talked about revisiting some of our other districts, and this one certainly can be revisited as well. We see this as kind of like a phase one, if you will, of let's get this created and provide a benefit to property owners if they opt into this that we've sort of heard, multiple times about, and then sort of go from there and see if there's adjustments we can make. So it certainly can be adjusted in the future. But for now, it's just the retail goods and personal service uses that would be permitted by right up to 2,000 square feet. And then would offer the option for a conditional use permit if it's over that square footage. So we thought that was, we looked at some existing buildings in Chelsea that had parking on their site. And a lot of the ones that really would be eligible for this overlay district were right up about 2,000 or less. So we felt like, that was a really good compromise between not, completely opening the doors and having valuable industrial property, being sort of taken by a lot of these different commercial uses, but still allowing that small scale boutique retail and personal services that we really think could help support districts like this. And in the employers that we see, the industrial employers, as well as the neighborhoods that tend to be in close proximity. So that's the amendment to create the district. The actual rezoning that we have, so more specifically, 1311 Redgate's on the south side of Redgate Avenue. It's in Chelsea, basically right across from the Orpax restaurant and the tennis courts to the north. So right there at the end of the street. It's a pretty large building with a fair amount of parking on site. And so we know that the Chelsea area, as far as existing conditions, it already has this kind of blend of industrial, commercial, and office uses. And it's really kind of just, again, this doesn't just apply to Chelsea, the overlay, but since, we have this application in front of us for this particular property, looking at Chelsea as a whole, it's just, really kind of an ideal place for that incremental mixed-use growth that this overlay district could sort of help facilitate. It would kind of open more opportunities for small-scale commercial activity without totally displacing those industrial businesses. And then again, the proposal would be to put that overlay on top of it. But the existing light industrial district would remain. And so we also want to take a look at the NFK 2050 future land use map, and how this property, this application for this particular property, but also the text amendment to create the overlay district as a whole, how it aligns with a comprehensive plan. And really, it very, as you can see, it is well aligned with the plan. So I think in general, as far as the future land use map goes, Community mixed use is the place type in Chelsea, and not the entirety of Chelsea. You know, the waterfront operators are different. That's an innovation and production, but you know, sort of that core Chelsea area there is community mixed use, and you know, this really aligns strongly with that because you know it supports this sort of neighborhood serving retail services and uses like that, walkability, that transitional character. In a lot of ways, it can support you know the mobility, kind of that multimodal mobility that we want to see in these community mixed use areas as well. I think, and then getting into actually the pillars, and this is sort of a summary a little of how it aligns with the pillars as well. With growing equitably, it really it can very much support small businesses by just capping the by right allowance of up to 2,000 square feet. Generally expanding access to everyday goods and diversifying our land uses in certain areas, and again encouraging adaptive reuse. So it very much meets that pillar. As far as celebrating our community, it would improve the walkability of our neighborhoods. Kind of our neighborhoods are already walkable, mixed use, just kind of strengthening what we already have in these areas, and then kind of adding to that local identity. And then as far as connecting the city, so again, at the mobility side of things, it's encouraging walkability, more bikeability, that first and last mile access by kind of providing more of these opportunities for, in this particular case, you know, residents of West Kent, you know, can certainly walk or bike to any kind of new commercial, small-scale commercial opportunity that might come about in some of these properties. And then, of course, we did want to reduce, in that pillar, there's talk of, you know, safety, of course, and reducing conflicts with freight traffic and truck traffic. So I think the overlay by, you know, requiring, again, that parking on site, you know, really kind of helping to mitigate the existing truck traffic that we have there. And I think just to, and then of course, for this particular application, you know, there's no, they're not proposing a use or anything here. It's more just to provide the opportunity. But in general, commercial and retail is a primary use in community mixed use place types. And, you know, IL district, there are a lot of IL districts out there that are in this place type. Some might be in innovation and production, some may be in here, but we know by and large there are a lot of light industrial zoning districts that are in the same place type in other places in the city. So it'd be a similar analysis, but on a case-by-case basis. And then just finally, you know, we just really see this as an implementation tool of the plan, you know, kind of enabling the flexible kind of mixed-use growth in appropriate areas. It preserves that industrial identity while adding those amenities I mentioned, which is that kind of gentle incremental change that the plan envisions in community mixed use. And it can help transform into older industrial areas into these safer, kind of more functional mixed-use corridors without this like large-scale redevelopment that may otherwise be required. So that is the presentation I had, but I'd be happy to have or answer any questions for you all.
We only have this applicant. We've reached out to multiple property owners in this area to see if they would like to be a part of this rezoning. We have not heard back from them. We did hear back from this property owner, so we were trying to make this hey, if everyone wants to hop on board, this is available to you. We're still working on reaching out. There may be a subsequent rezoning coming if the other folks get back to us into that. So.
I just had a question, because I know we have some retail, like, I don't know if it's tattoo
parlors
in there. I know they had a CUP, but they didn't require rezoning.
No. So there's the long story in the beginning. Where's Lenny at? Let me find Lenny. Tattoo parlors were required to go somewhere in the city. When we had the lawsuit with Blue Horseshoe Tattoo, we put them in the light industrial district. So that's just how it ended up there. Tattoo parlors were seen very differently 20 years ago than they are now. And so, yes, that is a personal service use that stands out as being separate. That is allowed already in light industrial. We understand. We heard the same thing. Restaurant also is allowed in light industrial. And so we're just, and then also there are some, what we would call in other zoning districts, artisan production, where they create the item and they sell the item on site. That's actually already allowed in industrial districts. It's just It's just the inverse. You're making the items and you create a 10% sales area that's already allowed in industrial. So we don't call it artisan production. We just call it industrial. You're doing something industrial. You just happen to have what they see is the boutique in the front, but everything else is in the back. So there are some things that already touch on the commercial style uses, which is why at Chris leaned on us hard on this one. I almost was like, I was at the point of just making it easy, but Chris had a bigger vision in trying to have this accomplished. So.
Do you have any residential actually in that area?
Yes.
Okay. So that's also mixed use.
We weren't ready to add that to this list. I will say there was at least one person that spoke very outwardly at the public meeting against any introduction of additional residential into these industrial properties. I think it's for a larger discussion.
Against what?
Adding additional residential uses in the mix of these industrial properties. So I think that's a much larger discussion. I think it's appropriate in some places that we've identified it. I just don't know. We weren't.
Do you mean commercial uses or?
Residential. Mixing uses, so residential above commercial uses. They were adamantly against it in the discussion.
So how are the current operations?
Some are grandfathered when you were allowed to have residential near the industrial workforce, so that you could go right there. But yeah, most of those are grandfathered or they're zone residential as you go, not even 200 feet from here. It's all zone residential.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chris. Good job.
Thank you.
We're just jumping all over the place, commissioners. I appreciate you.
Data
You're bearing with us. Data centers, zoning.
We're getting higher now.
I did not. Good afternoon, commissioners. Back in 2021, when I first started, cannabis had just proposed to become legal. It was actually the first project I was assigned, other than a staff report about short-term rentals. Obviously, it fell through the cracks, wasn't reenacted with the change in governor, and now it's coming back. So we're going over some of these updates with you and some of the things we might have to be thinking about in the next few months here. So the framework was vetoed by the governor originally after this bill was passed during the legislative session. And then during the state budget process, they enacted the law to create the retail sales starting July 1st, 2027. There's going to be 350 retail licenses spread across the state of Virginia. The applications will begin to be processed by the Cannabis Control Authority in February, with preliminary licenses granted sometime late spring of 2027. If you have any questions about the application process, or there's different people that get a lottery process and things like that, I'm not going over that in this presentation. I'd be happy to talk with you about it, or if you have any questions about it, I'd be happy to try to answer some of that right now. But it's not necessarily relevant to the land use aspect of this process. There are some applicants who are in areas that were disproportionately targeted by police activity for marijuana possession that have a separate application process before they get put into the regular lottery, things like that. The budget also includes information about taxation, the fines and penalties associated with operating a business not certified and or possessing excess marijuana compared to what you'd be allowed to carry under the new bill. Industrial hemp got updated, and there are also signage regulations specific to these different businesses. Again, I'd be happy to answer any questions I can, or if you have any questions, you can send me an email. I'll consult with the attorney as we review the bill. But I'm not going over that right now because it's not land use related specifically. There are some aspects of this that'll have to be addressed in future updates with the city council and things like that. But I really just wanted to go over what we're going to see from a land use perspective. So under the current zoning, we have a use called cannabis dispensing facility. This was our first crack at putting something on the map to say, if you want it, you need a CUP. We included both medical and recreational dispensing facilities in this definition. We allow it by conditional use permit in CC and CR, and our restrictions from where they could be located was 1,000 feet from a school or childcare facility and 1,000 feet from another cannabis dispensary. And we also restricted the hours of operation to 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. There's also a use cannabis cultivation or manufacturing facility, which we allow by conditional use permit in the IG district. Our performance standard said that it has to be conducted entirely indoors and it shall not annoy your neighbors from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. So that's where we are right now. In the state update, they changed some of the definitions, the most notable one being that they changed the term from cannabis to marijuana, except for one use, which they took our cannabis dispensing facility and kept it as the definition, the name for the dual use facility of medical and retail. I don't know if they actually used it. I'm not saying they stole anything from us. I'm just saying they kept the name. But otherwise, the other uses that they created, some of them are new, some of them are just renaming retail marijuana store, marijuana cultivation facility, marijuana processing, marijuana transporter facility, marijuana delivery, marijuana testing facility, and marijuana microbusiness. So retail marijuana store is exactly what it sounds like. It's a facility that gets authorized to sell retail marijuana by the Cannabis Control Authority. I'm not going to read all the state definitions because they just wanted to make sure they covered every part of the plant marijuana to cover anything that could be sold. The distance requirement was updated. In the previous legislation, there were a couple more restrictions, including playground and government-owned facility. Those words were taken out, so the state language now says it cannot be located within 1,000 feet of a hospital, public, private, or parochial school or institution of higher education or child day program. And that child day program is a term in state code. It is just the day facilities, child day facilities, not the home daycare facilities. And then not located within 1,000 feet of another retail marijuana store. And again, there's 350 of these licenses that'll be available throughout the state.
Could you explain the reasoning by why you don't want it 100 feet from another store?
You don't want to have a concentration of them, I think was the initial. Because if you look at some places like New York City and Colorado, one of the things that happened is you would end up with entire blocks of them. And I do mean literal house, like storefront, random business, storefront, all of cannabis. In addition,
There are only going to be 350 in the whole state.
That requirement's from the state.
that's not us, that's the state code requirement.
That's the state code requirement when they issue.
Sorry.
Also, if you have a concentration of them, you tend to have too many vehicles parking all for that use and stuff like that. There are other things, I mean, we have some requirements like that for other uses. So based on our current zoning, and this is not saying that future we won't change this to the CCCR, but based on the 1,000-foot buffer requirement and what we currently allow for the zoning, the areas in, I'm gonna call it the light tan color, I don't know if that's the right color or not, it's blue? Light blue, are the areas that are zone CC and CR that would fall outside of that 1,000-foot buffer. Just for an idea of what it would look like in the city. So cannabis dispensing facility is a facility that does retail marijuana and medical marijuana. It has to be owned in part by a pharmaceutical processor. In those same regulations, there's 5 health service areas across the state. You can have one processor in each health service area, and that processor can have up to 5 retail locations in their health service area. So there's one in for our health service area, the cultivation facility and their processing and stuff is all done in Portsmouth. And we have one location, it's cannabis, it's in Ward's Corner. And they got in before we required a CUP for either use. I think they're currently listed as a pharmacy right now. So the difference between retail and medical, obviously you need a medical card, but you can also give different amounts to the medical patients and different different concentrations, different amounts. There's limits to how much marijuana you can carry at any one time as a regular person, but if you have that medical card, you can be given more by the pharmacist. The requirement is that a pharmacist has to be on site at all times to dispense marijuana products. A lot of these facilities will have separate sections. You go in one door sometimes if you're going to the medical side, or you go into another door if you're doing retail. I've been to a couple facilities that have both uses. They check, they have like the driver's license check, and then they check the card. In New Jersey, it was separate entrances. In the place I went to in Maryland, they just took you to a separate counter for it so that the pharmacist could look over your stuff and talk to you. In the initial 2021, I said that they're going to look between some type of a DMV and a cross with an Apple store. And it's kind of the same experience you're going to get. You don't just walk up, grab something off the shelf, and go to the counter and go like you would at a convenience store. You have to go back with somebody. They keep the product separately in a different area, and they check you out right in front of you as opposed to going to a register. There's several different things that happen other than growing and selling. There's processing, manufacturing, making the products, getting rid of the bad cannabis. When you propagate it, only certain strands are good, and so you have to destroy the other stuff in certain ways, turning it into the edibles or things like that. We kind of grouped them all together in our last attempt because the land use impact is ultimately the same. These are more larger industrial style warehouses or buildings that do all of the growing that you would find processing the cannabis into its final product. So again, it's that everything almost that isn't separate, we kind of grouped it all together in one when we're looking at it from a land use perspective. Most of the cultivation for marijuana is done indoors. These are long warehouses that have lights that run basically 24/7 to continue the growing cycles. And then there are different tiers of cultivation. Right now, the tier 5s are the largest ones. I don't have the exact size definitions in front of me because we think that it doesn't matter if it's grown super, super small, super big, you're still going to have similar impacts. We are thinking about potentially doing a conditional use permit for all these marijuana-related uses. So again, the size of it isn't necessarily a huge deal if we're going to look at each of these individually. The tier 5 cultivation facilities, they're only allowing a very small number in the state, and those are the ones that are going to be your pharmaceutical processors that already have the cultivation facilities started and operated. Bless you. Marijuana testing facility is a new one that they created or they've updated. A facility licensed to develop, research, transport, or test marijuana. Essentially, we think it's going to be like a laboratory where you have someone taking samples from products that are about to be released. They bring them to the facility to test them. That's what we think the transport is going to be, but we're not entirely sure how this one's going to look in practice. Because you need someone to take the samples to the facility to be tested and then drop them back off after they've been tested. I think that's what the transportation is going to be. But again, we're not sure what exactly that's going to look like, but I did want to bring it up to you as a potential new use. Marijuana transporter facility. There's a lot of words there. Essentially, you have a trucking company or a company that loads up marijuana from the cultivation facilities and ships it to either other processors, other manufacturers, or the retail market. This is not the people who go on DoorDash and deliver marijuana. This is not the same use. There is a use.
Those people?
Not right now.
Just kidding.
I know. So there is a separate use for that. But after consultation with the attorney's office, we don't think we're going to see it in a commercial setting for the individual delivery. A lot of times we expect the retail facilities to offer delivery because there's limits to how much any person can carry at any one time. There's no third-party delivery, so you can't use Grubhub or DoorDash or anything like that under the legislation to order marijuana and have it delivered to your door. You can do it through the retail location's website, but there's still verification of all the documentation and stuff like that that you have to go through with the delivery person. And they strictly said no third party for any of this delivery. There's no drive-through for, no showing up, getting your marijuana in your bag and driving home. You have to go into the store or get your ID verified through the delivery. So these are really the people taking it from the cultivation to the retail store or from cultivation to manufacturing or wholesale, things like that. We don't know exactly what type of size vehicles we're going to be looking at for this. It's one of the things we're contemplating. We don't know what hours the deliveries are going to happen, but those are some of the things we're thinking about as well with this. And then there's the most confusing one, is marijuana microbusiness. This is a facility that's allowed to do any of those things except transportation at one facility and multiple of them. So this is like the I'm going to say the mom and pop shop, where you can have someone growing cannabis in the back, maybe doing some manufacturing or processing, rolling and bagging, things like that, and also have a small section for retail sales. You can't have multiple uses. They can't have multiple uses in the same facility. They can't have more than one of each facility. So there's, in the language, there's allowance for having your cultivation and your retail sales in different sites, different buildings, provided they're not within I don't remember the exact distance, it's like 20 miles. They can have to be within 20 miles or something like that of each other. There are more strict size requirements for these operations, including the cultivation size, the retail size, but they're still subject to all the distance requirements of retail marijuana stores and things of that nature. And that's just a brief overview of what we're looking at from a land use perspective with this. Again, if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. And if you have any questions about any of the uses I just went over, and how we might see it in Norfolk, I'd be happy to go over it.
Thank you. Any questions for Rob? No? Good work, thank you. I do remember that first presentation too.
We are probably going to look into an initiation. I don't know if it'll be this month or next month, just so we can get all the uses cleaned up and squared away before the applications start in February. The application process is going to kind of look similar to how ABC notifies the city about applicants who are looking to go into a certain location in the city. We get a certain amount of time, usually it's 30 days, to notify the Cannabis Control Authority, or the ABC now, but it'll be the Cannabis Control Authority, saying they need a conditional use permit, or this zoning district doesn't work, et cetera. And that's when we think they can still get issued a preliminary approval from the Cannabis Control Authority. They have 18 months from their preliminary approval to get all of the documents finalized, the zoning compliance and things like that, before they can open with their final approval. So they won't open, but they can still get, it's like, hey, your spot's reserved here, but go finish the rest of the processes you need to finish. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Rob.
Commissioner, I apologize for all the presentations. It is all over the place at this point, but just make sure I grab all my paperwork as well. Commissioners, you'll remember at the end of, or a few weeks ago, I sent an email stating that Ms. Sutterth and Mr. Bateman had requested that I also provide you with another option as we were looking at the regulations that were put in front of us, or that you'd like to recommend or take a look at as we looked at for the Willoughby short-term rental limitation overlay. The first one is the one that you recommended at the that you gave me direction to move forward with during the public hearing day in July. That was to allow for the hybrid approval process with a 500-foot buffer. So just to kind of go over it, and you have the text in front of you. One, they're both labeled. One says 500-foot buffer, and the other one is the other one that was requested. So the request that you initially gave me direction on was to allow all the existing vacation rentals to be able to reapply through the administrative approval process. That would be all the ones that existed as of June 1st of this year. There would be a 500-foot buffer area that's created based on those that are already approved. And properties located outside the buffer area would be allowed to obtain approval through an administrative zoning permit. And this is where this will vary from what I provide you as the request from the chair and vice chair. Any properties located inside the buffer could request a CUP, whether it be 1 or 2 family, multifamily, and then of course for the one that exists now, which is to waives the parking requirements. In there are enhanced review standards for the conditional use permit, which would make it, which would give us direction as staff on what we would recommend.
which more than likely, based on that language in there, is that there are few and far between situations that 500 feet would be appropriate, and there are even less circumstances that 300 feet would be appropriate. And then there's also additional enforcement language that was added to clarify the process. So this was the one that you'd initially given me direction on. The one that I sent out in the email was what I'm calling option B, so that we don't confuse all of the options. This is the administrative approval for 1 and 2 family uses, so single family and duplexes with a 300-foot buffer. So same thing again, all existing vacation rentals would be allowed to reapply through the administrative approval process. We would create a 300-foot buffer that surrounds those existing that are approved. And then anything that's located outside of that buffer area would be allowed to be permitted through administrative approval process. This is where it got a little wonky, and this is where I take responsibility for the confusion that may come from any of the discussions. My email that I sent the Planning Commission said that there were no CUPs that would be considered through the process. My brain, when I wrote that email, left out portions of the information, and so and also it wasn't the direction that was given to me from the chair and the vice chair. So I take responsibility for the confusion that I have provided to the community at this point. This option initially had 3 units, multifamily properties that could be requested through the conditional use permit process regardless of location. So that means it could be inside or outside of the buffer. To note, that's not supported by the Willoughby Civic League representatives, nor was the direction that was given to me by the chair and vice chair. My brain processed it differently, and when I was writing it, I thought I was going in the correct direction, and I made a mistake. So what you have in front of you removes the conditional use permit allowance. So the only thing that's permitted in the language that you have in front of you is that 1 and 2 family, single family and duplex, are permitted to be short-term rentals as long as they're outside of the 300-foot buffer from other short-term rentals. No conditional use permit to ask to be within the buffer area. The only exemption is what exists now, which means if you have a short-term rental and you want a waiver of the parking requirement, you need to get approval. So you need a conditional use permit. So that's not inside the buffer. That you have to meet the buffer requirement. So let's say you're outside of the buffer, you're short a parking space. You don't get an administrative approval. You have to get a conditional use permit to waive the parking requirement. Okay. The review standards for the CUPs is listed here, but that's removed from that because there's no additional review standard for conditional use permits moving forward. But we do have the additional enforcement language that stays in the area. So the language you have in front of you also notes that there's a 300-foot linear buffer, just for clarity, for the measurement, and it's from the parcel. It's not from the center of the parcel. It's from we have the parcel showing. It essentially goes out from the parcel 300 feet. Okay. These are the 2 options that I have in front of you right now. So just to clarify, there's the one that had the conditional use permit for the 3 units or more that was my mistake and is not a part of the 2 that you're considering at this moment. So the comments, received the email. I think most of the commissioners did, but we have them printed out for you. The Willoughby Civic League has provided their comments again. They have noted that they are okay with the 300-foot buffer at this moment, and the fact that they do not want any CUPs. They have requested a number of other changes, which include not changes, but more clarifications in the language, which included the linear measurement. And there's one that probably needs further discussion. Staff feels that there's a component, if you remember, there's an active zoning approval. So we have 60 days. Anyone that has an existing short-term rental, they have 60 days from its expiration to reapply and get approval. The community would like them to have the application in the door before the expiration, and then have it completed through the process in the 60 days. It can go either way. We believe that the additional 60 days won't matter. If you miss your deadline, you're probably gonna miss all of it. We're just trying to provide buffer for people when they transfer the property and they don't realize what's happened, but we understand the concern about adding that. The proposal you have in front of you leaves the language the same right now. It says it gives them 60 days to apply for their renewal. So that does not reflect the community's requests. Okay. The Strive operators, they prefer a hybrid approach where they can ask for a conditional use permit, but with a much more significantly smaller buffer, at least from the last correspondence I have. This was the correspondence that I provided to you at the public hearing date. They would want a smaller buffer of 100 feet. They listed a range of them, but the smallest one was 100 feet. And then the ability to ask for conditional use permits inside the 100-foot buffer. Just for information, I provided this to you at the public hearing day. This is the 300-foot buffer. We've shown here where we've had violations of existing short-term rentals and where there are open violations as of the date of this map. You can see that on the bottom right-hand corner, we did a quick analysis of the properties. Again, if it touches the corner of a property, it's not eligible. But there are, outside of the existing 300-foot buffer, there are 41 single-family homes and 3 duplexes that are eligible. Not all of those would be eligible because once one gets one, they'll add another buffer, and so it wouldn't necessarily mean there would be 41 new ones. It just says those are what's eligible at the moment. Here's the 500-foot buffer from the previous proposal. Outside of that buffer, there are 10 single-family homes and no duplexes. So this is a much more limited factor, but the previous proposal did show that you could ask for a conditional use permit inside the buffer. With that, I want to be able to finalize the text, picking between these two from the Planning Commission. That way we can have the staff report and share it with the community either tomorrow or Monday and get all the comments from the community moving forward. So with that, I open up for questions or comments.
Any questions?
So to confirm, the only impact to the current STR owners is them having to reapply.
Yeah, they actually, the ones that have conditional use permits will have an easier route for a reapproval, so they'll get administrative approvals.
We had some instances presented to us about people not getting the correspondence from the city on time. I'm thinking about the 60-day administrative. Have we looked into ways that we can minimize that?
Yes, staff has been very thorough, poking holes in everything that I've written down. And so a lot of it is process-wise. Christine's not here, she's off today, the project manager for the short-term rentals. We've decided to do kind of a 3-2-1, so 3-month countdown. At 3 months, you get a warning, hey, you're gonna expire. 2 months, you're gonna expire. We already send the 1 month that, hey, you're gonna expire at the end of the month. So we're gonna do, 3 months, 2 months, 1 month to remind them, hey, don't lose it, because it will go away, so.
And we're going to also, I think some of the problem was addresses changed and.
Right. So what we do is when we have the administrative approval process, we have their email address, so we'll also send a letter. Our plan is to also send a letter at each of those, because it ends up technically being a warning, almost like a the zoning determination that you're about to fall off. The point of doing it is to say you're about to fall off the list, so we want to make sure it's as official as possible.
2 additional warnings.
2 additional warnings, yes, earlier in the process. And we're going to implement that across all of them, because it's hard for Christine just to say, you just do this in the Willoughby, and the other ones, so we'll just tell them good luck. No, we're going to try to implement it across the board, so.
60 days. Currently, the way it's written is that they have 60 days to apply.
And get approval.
And get approval.
Mm-hmm.
And the community wants all the application and approval done before 60 days?
They want the application before the expiration, but the approval can come after, in that 60-day window. We believe that there might be some instances, I'd rather err on the side of caution when we're removing someone's right that they obtained, especially if they already have one, because we may end up in front of the Board of Zoning Appeals and they'll just say, sure, that sounds reasonable, let them apply. We believe the buffer, unfortunately, the ones that have been like, hey, I'd like to reapply, when they've missed it more than 30 days. They're like 3 months out. They're way out of line. And so those are a little bit easier. The ones that are kind of in that range, they're either like a little bit earlier. We just think it's a little cleaner and kind of makes it easier for us to shut the door at the end by holding to the 60-day, by allowing them to reapply in the 60 days.
Thank
But again, whatever the direction of the commission is on that one.
What plans do we have in place for us figuring out how this is working for the community? I've shared before that I have a concern that this is going to increase in number of illegal STRs. So do we have like a follow-up plan for 6 months out that we're going to relook at this?
We don't have the exact follow-up plan yet. We do need to do a follow-up. We're having a follow-up meeting once we get through this portion with the community and the operators to talk about enforcement, so that we can all be on the same page. We also are coordinating an uptick in enforcement in the Willoughby area, regardless of if it's short-term rentals or just regular properties. So that's part of it too.
I think a lot of that failure to enforce zoning rules has contributed to the fear on STRs.
Yeah, the zoning rules, we've stretched as far as we were comfortable at the time, but now we've got about 2 or 3 more tools. We're gonna just give it a try and see what happens. Just to try to make more progress in the enforcement. Some of the other things are outside of our current span of control, like trash cans and other things that we just need to coordinate with other departments to assure that we're keeping track of these issues and making sure that we're actually citing folks. Again, as I noted previously, when the zoning inspector was out and kind of tallying up the violations that were out there, they weren't from the short-term rentals. It was from all the renters or owners in the area, so.
Any other questions?
If I may, just I believe we have 2 options. I believe staff's recommendation at this point would be to do the 300-foot buffer with no CUPs, just for ease of operation for us. Again, these rules can always be reevaluated in the future, but I think that makes it the cleanest for us to operate at this time. So
I think that was B, was that?
that's option B, yes.
Anyone opposed to option B?
I would like it codified though, when we're going to be looking at how this is going, instead of just saying in the future.
Understood. We have an obligation to the community to do this right. So we're working on it. We will be transparent on that. I think we've gotten a lot of other things that we're trying to support the PD with at this moment, with other things going on. So we're not going to let this one fall off. But I think with the off season coming up, this will help us kind of circle the wagons a little bit and try to come up with a good.
Developing what the baseline is, once this goes into action, how many illegal properties we have.
Yes.
It'll ebb and flow, I'm sure. But
Yes. Right. We're gonna try. We won't share it right now, but there are a couple procedures that we haven't tried yet that we're gonna try to see if we can use in court with the judges. Yeah, we've been a little iffy, but we're gonna give it a try. Kind of putting 2, like an inspection and some information that we received from our data scraper to see if we can put the 2 information sets together and provide that as being a violation. We're going to work through that. It'll be a little bit more legwork to try to do, and also to try not to be not welcoming, right? We don't want to be not welcoming to people visiting the city, so we're trying to figure out how to balance that when we do walk up to the door and knock and say, hey, how you guys doing? Are you from out of town? So we're trying to balance that and being very careful, so.
Any other questions? Thank you, great work, appreciate it, thank you.
All right.
All right, let's go ahead and go through our public hearing preview.
All right, so first is a continued item. This is Macondo at 2325 East Little Creek Road. This is south side of East Little Creek Road near Halprin Drive. It's currently vacant, and the proposal is a restaurant with extended hours, live entertainment, sale of alcohol for on and off premise consumption. It is consistent with NFK 2050. It is zoned CC, and you need a CUP for sale of alcohol beverages, both on and off, and live entertainment. Here's a photo of the site. here is their most recent site plan. All of this is the same as you saw last time, which was in April, was the last time you saw this in front of you. And this too, both of the floor plan and the site plan are the same, except for in the far right corner, they got rid of where it said stage outside, and they've put another picnic table. The only change is on their capacity has gone up because they added a picnic table. Other than that, everything is exactly what you saw last time. As a reminder, this was here in April. There was some discussion with the apartment building next door that was concerned. They originally were proposing outdoor entertainment. After the applicant, discussed that with the apartment complex manager, they withdrew their proposal for the outdoor entertainment. They'll still have it indoors, and they'll have the outside. The music will turn off at 10 p.m. every day. So there's not excess noise out there for the people that are living there. This was originally in April. It was continued until May so that they could have time to figure that out. They figured it out, but it was continued from May because the applicant and the owner couldn't be here until August, and they both wanted to be here. Any questions? Mm-hmm.
Good afternoon. We have some design review previews for these. None of these items have been to the board yet, but they're scheduled for the 24th agenda. So this is to construct a 5-unit townhouse in the Coastal Character District at 1283 Little Bay Avenue, 9638, 9634, and 9630 13th View Street. Here's the existing site. So this property was formerly owned by NRHA and has since been conveyed for private development, which is then requires review by the Architectural Review Board. Here's some of the surrounding context. And then here's the proposed townhouses. This did come before the board as a discussion item on the August 10th meeting, and the comments were focused on primarily that right side elevation, which is the colored rendering facing 13th View. So the board recommended adding 2 square windows. The window on the second floor that's offset towards the front porch, there's a fireplace in between those 2 windows, and they can't align those windows because of the fireplace. And so the board recommended putting 2 square windows on either side of the fireplace. And then to add some more decorative trim in the gable end. And they also requested a shadow of the plants planted along this elevation. The plantings shown in this rendering are not accurate to what's proposed. We haven't received the updated plans yet, but don't see any issues with this one. And then this is the site plan.
This one's going to be really brief. This has not come to the board yet, but it will come on the 24th. So the Friends of the Fred Hewitt Center are working on, they have a long-term project to phase several gardens in the area, either side of the ferry terminal. So they applied for a grant to start parts of phase 1, which is the children's garden. So on the left, that's a later phase. On the right, top right corner is the children's garden. They'll be putting in a fence this year to kind of kick that off. It will include some play stuff eventually. I'm still getting clarification on the full extent of the scope that is being funded with this grant. I've been trying to talk with them to see how much of their overall plan we might be able to include with this design review so that when they do have funding for the other elements, they can just move forward. They have indicated that they don't feel confident with the level of decision-making that's been made about those things to present that as in full. So we will see how much of that will be able to come through. But generally speaking, it's just going to be a wood fence that's similar to the one that's out there. And eventually will blossom into a very nice children's play area with these types of amenities. and that's later. So, any questions about Fred Hewitt? Excellent, thank you.
While Rob's coming up, I'll jokingly say Macondo, the continued agenda item, that was before Russell went out for his hip surgery and got a new hip. So.
I'll be doing it again.
Yeah, so I'll be doing my best Russell impression. I don't think I can grow my beard that long for the public hearing. My wife is happy. All right, I'm also doing my best Susan impression for this meeting and the public hearing, since she will not be here, but this has been her project. A text amendment to allow additional uses by conditional use permit in the airport district. So the airport owns property inside the complex and outside of the terminal complex. And they closed one of the runways in addition to doing some other work in the airport. Obviously, we've seen the master plan. We've seen, if you've flown out of Norfolk recently, you've seen the massive amount of machinery they have there. Lots of work is being done. But there's some things we can do from a zoning perspective to facilitate some more of that development. So there's 4 areas that are going to be affected, that are going to be primarily the focus of the redevelopment with the closing of that runway and the selling of leasing of property. Zone 1 is 1924 and 1927 Norview Avenue. Zone 2, which is Robin Hood Road parcel. Zone 3 is the TNC lot gas station and observation area. And Zone 4 is the intersection of Robin Hood Road and Military Highway. These text amendments we're looking at zones 2 and 3 for how these the text amendments will affect those zones in particular. So zone 2 is right where you would be looking if you're driving through down Norview Avenue. It'll be on your right side. Going into the airport, the airport is proposing to have a hotel there. So right now, hotel and alcohol sales are permitted inside and outside the complex. Restaurant is permitted but requires a CUP. But things that commonly support hotels, conference centers, and banquet halls are not allowed in the airport district. So we are proposing to modify the airport district to allow conference center and banquet hall outside of the airport terminal complex. For Zone 3, gas station is not allowed at all in the airport right now. I know many people who have driven rental cars to this facility and complain that they have to go out of their way to get gas as opposed to stopping somewhere right near the airport. This will also support the additional rental car facility that's being constructed in the airport. All the other accessory uses that we see with gas stations, the convenience store, the smoking vaping sales, and the ABC off-premise is already permitted by conditional use permit both inside and outside the complex. So the proposal is to allow gas station inside or outside the complex by conditional use permit. And this is lastly just cleaning up something that's been a long-standing policy for the city. We've allowed restaurants to sell alcohol within the terminal complex. The airport was existing prior to the zoning ordinance and the requirements of a special exception for the CUPs for ABC. So those establishments were always vested. We're proposing to just spell it out nice and clean that all restaurants within the airport terminal with alcohol, entertainment, and or closing by 2 a.m. are allowed by right inside the terminal complex. Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Just real quick, I'll add to, we talked about zones 2 and 3 in that one. Zones 1 and 4 are further off the complex and would go through a complete rezoning process. So they are under the control of the airport. So we're not ignoring that. We believe that there's a whole different public process that will happen to deal with any redevelopment of those sites.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. It feels like it's been a while since I've been in front of all of you. Happy to be here. My presentations will be brief as Jeremy has introduced the initiation of these 2 signed text amendments at last month's meeting. The first item is the Riverview pedestrian overlay. Earlier this year in February, Susan and Jeremy did meet with the Riverview Business Association. Jeremy continued conversations with them in person and through email to fully understand their concerns and ultimately to lead to the development of this text amendment. As the slide states, it is initiated at their request about window coverings and signs for existing buildings. The next point on the slide states, this revision to the zoning ordinance would give business owners and inspectors clear guidance on when the front facade must remain transparent and when blinds and curtains may be used. This next slide here just shows two local examples of businesses using blinds and curtains that obstruct visibility into the interior, which could cause potential safety concerns. So the text amendment will read as follows. During all hours of business operation, all glass portions of windows and doors along the street-facing front facade shall be maintained as transparent as defined in section 8.32, terms defined, and shall not be obscured by blinds or curtains except those necessary to block direct sunlight. To share the definition of transparent from within the zoning ordinance, it is those portions of the facade of a building that consist of materials through which the interior of the building, to the depth of at least 5 feet, may be readily seen from the street or the sidewalk. So this next slide, the Riverview Business Association also raised concerns about the amount of temporary signage allowed in their district. If you were at the previous mid-month meeting, you may remember that Jeremy shared a page of what looked like a Greek mathematical formulation that one of the inspectors had tried to use to determine the whether or not a business had exceeded its maximum sign requirements. We realize it's time to simplify that. As this slide states, this revision to the zoning ordinance would give owners and inspectors clear guidance on how to calculate sign maximums. Staff suggested applying these changes citywide to establishing and maintaining visibility for public safety. And as staff, we also do consider these two to be two separate amendments, so you'll be making two votes on this, as one is for the overlay and the other one is for the overall city. And so this image on the left is just a common diagram, just showing how storefronts are often composed entirely of windows. The image on the right is another local example of a business where signs are obstructing the interior, which can again cause potential safety concerns. So lastly, the text will read as follows for the amendment. To support productive business operations while protecting the safety and welfare of city inhabitants by ensuring adequate visibility and minimizing negative impacts on inhabitants, the following shall apply to all temporary and permanent signs, window signs. 1, no more than one window sign, no larger than 15 square feet, with a maximum dimension of 5 feet, may be installed for every 10 feet of ground story building facade, with no more than 5 signs permitted per business. 2, no window sign may exceed 30% of the area of the window on which it is installed. 3, for the purposes of this section, A, the area of the window shall be determined by including all areas of glazing, not separated by a frame or structural elements larger than 4 inches wide. B, any sign content not legible from the vehicular travel lanes of adjacent streets shall not be considered a window sign, however, shall meet the window transparency requirements of this section. Thank you. And I'll stand by for any questions.
Is, in the very first slide you showed, and it states unless there's, for purposes of blocking sunlight. And I see that as a real loose consideration. I don't know if others feel that. Using blinds, if your business points east or west, certainly you're gonna have more direct sunlight.
Yeah, I can explain how that's essentially how the inspectors have been handling it for the last couple of years. Essentially, if they go by and there's the blinds are blocking a direct sunbeam, that's okay. If they're not blocking a direct sunbeam, they need to be up. And that's how we've enforced it tried to enforce it downtown, where you do have more strict requirements. So the proposal is to broaden that out to Riverview as well.
So you think that language is sufficient then?
I think it's sufficient to cover what we're doing. There's always going to be interpretation, and there's always going to be a point of argument with the inspector. But essentially, if they're down while I see the sunlight, you're good. If they're down while I don't see the sunlight, and they're not serving a purpose right now, then they should be up. Or if you're closed, and we're okay with that being down. That's the way we've approached it the last few years.
Actually, that last sentence is interesting. So we allow folks to close windows completely if they're closed.
We have, yes.
That seems odd to me. I mean, has that always been the case?
I don't know that that's always been the case. It's been the case for the last several years, basically since I've kind of overseen enforcement. I think, there have been different approaches over the years. But that's kind of been the way we approach it. All we're trying to do in this amendment is codify the way we've been doing it. If there's a different policy direction, we're happy to review it.
And again, I'm not questioning what you guys are doing. I think this is great. I'm just thinking PDs comes up to a building where there's a call, a break-in, and all the windows are blocked, shades, they can't see in. That to me sounds like a risk of, I would think transparency would be welcome all the time. So.
I think addressing that issue, our plan is to work with the city attorney's office to have a different, larger transparency requirement. That's in the city code, not just the zoning one that deals with signage. So we're working on, we've discussed that and punted it around. We have to bring PD in to talk about it because that's where the concern came from. So we believe we'll mesh that idea into that change as well. Thank you.
So with this definition, is there a sample that you can show us that meets that requirement? So that one on the right meets that requirement?
It does not.
Okay.
Does
Is there one that you can show us that does?
It would
'Cause
be-
it's hard to do all those calculations.
That's true. That would have been a good slide. Or the slide of Jeremy's inspector's map. But nonetheless, so it's going to be every 10 feet, they're allowed a sign. And no more than 5.
So I read it as 5 feet within 10 feet, so basically half the windows can be signage.
Depending on how big the window is.
It's at 30% right there.
Right.
30.
So, 5 feet maximum within 10 feet. Sounds like half to me.
We'll draw something up. So the key is that the current ordinance says you can cover 30% of your windows, period. And so then it's how do you calculate all of this? Now we're saying you get one sign no larger than this that can't take up more than 30% of your window. So it's easier to go, all right, you got one sign, then you can go, you don't have to count all multiple signs. You can tell them if they've got 3 signs in there, you say, take the other ones out, and then you can measure the one that's legal. So it's easier to enforce, but I understand what you're saying. It gets it can be confusing.
Do the inspectors feel this is a workable proposal? I mean, it seems really onerous to me.
Based on how it is now, yes, I believe any improvement would be better.
Good for them.
And so like I was saying, these lines in between this wouldn't necessarily matter. It's not one individual little square. Those wouldn't count. Any other questions?
It would be helpful if we could get a example.
We've got some, we've got some that
That's
we
why
can,
the public hearing,
yeah.
Yes.
gotcha.
Yeah, we've got several. Your typical fast food actually does the best job of that because they send out, McDonald's sends the same package to all of their restaurants and here's what they can look like. So we've got some good, I just don't know if we've ever actually taken pictures of them, but we've seen them.
Yes.
So we can get pictures of them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it.
We're out of text amendments now. This is Dorican.
Coming to renew a conditional use permit for live entertainment and the sale of ABC for on and off premise consumption. This is on the southwest corner of First View Street and West Ocean View Avenue. They got a conditional use permit in 2024 and are looking to renew as a first-time entertainment operator. They only had 2 years, so their CUP is expiring. They need a new one. NFK 2050 doesn't use the site as community mixed use, where commercial is a primary use. Property is on CSC Community Commercial. In this district, you need a conditional use permit for live entertainment, to sell alcohol for on-premise consumption after 5 p.m., and to sell alcohol for off-premises. Here's a picture of the site. Again, they opened in 2024. We have not had any relevant calls to the police or the city, complaints, violations, anything like that over the past 2 years. This is the floor plan. The big change that they're requesting is that area that's highlighted in yellow on the bottom right. They have entertainment right now, live band and karaoke. They're not requesting a change to that, but, and I'm using the applicant's words here, they don't want to be the dance police. Their customers apparently like to move and groove at their own tables. And I'm just repeating what I was told. And their CUP specifically says there shall be no dancing and no dance floor shall be provided. So as part of this renewal, she's adding a dance floor that will be clearly delineated, either with tape or something else. They have plenty of space to move the tables around, but that area is where the dance floor will be, and yes, they will be allowed to dance at their tables. It does not restrict, the CUP does not restrict dancing to the dance floor exclusively. But they have entertainment once, maybe twice a month, and again, we haven't had any issues or complaints about this establishment. So just giving you all the information now, I probably won't get into that much during the public hearing. So currently, they're open from 7 to 11, 7 days a week, New Year's Eve and December 12th through the 15th until 1 a.m. They're requesting to be open from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Saturday through Sunday, and then still maintaining December 12th through 15th and New Year's Eve until 1 a.m. Their capacity is not changing. It's 299 total people, and the entertainment of live band and karaoke is not changing either.
Two years ago with the parking?
Yes.
That's all been, so, we have not heard any complaints or concerns. There have been some anecdotal ones when I spoke to the representatives of the shopping center, but they in general have concerns about everyone parking there to go to the beach. So to try to divvy it up, well, I believe we'll probably still need to recommend the same things about the directing of traffic and letting people know where to park.
Yeah.
Just so that they're more active in that than having their customers park across the street.
Yeah, they still have the signs and the people, and if they do have entertainment, I saw the signs when I was in there. I don't think we have a problem keeping that condition in there, just to help facilitate. This is the largest establishment in that stretch of places that are allowed to have entertainment. There's Mojita Cafe and OV Beach Tavern that are both there, but they're significantly smaller than this establishment. So I think keeping that condition in there is appropriate. And since we haven't had any issues with this establishment, and this is now their renewal, we're not proposing a sunset on their application. It would still be tied to the ownership and managers, though. So if they change ownerships of the establishment or the managers change, they have to either modify their CUP appropriately or get a new CUP.
Okay, the next one is for Elizabeth Kane, for a conditional use permit for vacation rental at 1229 Hillside Avenue. This is the south side of Hillside Avenue between Beachview Street and Warwick Avenue. It's a single-family home, and they would like a short-term rental vacation rental. So NFK 2050 designates it as sustained coastal. It's zoned RC. And since there are 4 bedrooms in the house, they need a CUP for a vacation rental. So here's a photo of the site. We're not proposing any landscaping requirements. They meet the tree canopy. They've got shrubs in the front. It looks real nice from the street. The only real thing we're proposing is regarding their pool in the back. So they've got this pool in the back. It was permitted when it was built a number of years ago, as was the pool barrier, but the pool barrier is no longer compliant. The fence to the side, which is the middle picture on the right, you see the fence is kind of in disrepair. The fence doesn't belong to them, so they're working with their neighbor to fix it, but they will have to get a pool barrier permit so that an inspector can go make sure that their pool barrier is up to code. So for the neighborhood analysis, there are 70.6 of the parcels in 500 feet are residential. And if this is approved, 1.3% of those would be short-term rentals. Any questions?
I have a question about the pool barrier permit.
Yes, ma'am.
This is to make sure that it's an appropriate barrier?
So the building code requires there be a pool barrier that keeps, young children, people that are unauthorized from being out. And it's got a whole bunch of different ways you can do it. It could be a, 4-foot tall fence that just goes around the pool deck. It could be like in this scenario, we typically don't like to see somebody else's fence as your pool barrier because you don't have control over it. We also don't like to see the finished side facing the pool because you could conceivably climb over it with the horizontal members on the other side. The building code does allow that in some circumstances where the horizontal members are so far apart that you can't climb them. I think it's 50 something inches, but they have to be that far apart. This one is not. That's kind of scalloped fence there. The low point, it may be 4 feet. So they've got it does not meet the requirements. The other things, the gate, right now you can see it's held closed with bricks. Any of your fences going in should be self-closing. They should open to the outside, so if for some reason it doesn't latch and you've got a small kid, they push it, it latches, and they can't get into the pool. The picture there of the back door, this is what they consider, the building code considers the house as part of your pool barrier. So the door and windows there should have alarms on the inside since they're part of the pool barrier, so if your kid gets to it, they go off. There are some other ways they could, solve that, if they wanted to upgrade the rail and put gates on that deck, that could conceivably be a barrier. We're not going to require them do anything specific other than to make it compliant and get an inspection for a pool barrier permit.
And, are you aware of their experience operating short-term rentals? Using a service?
She is not using a service. She does have a local representative that's going to be her emergency contact. And she runs another business, and she's got another employee that's helping her with that too. But I believe this is her only short-term rental.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next applicant is Beck Property Holdings LLC. This is a conditional use permit for a short-term rental at 2410 Aspen Street. Location is the east side of Aspen Street between Larkin Street and Denver Avenue. This is in the Sherwood Forest neighborhood. It's currently a 3-bedroom, single-family home built in 1940, and the proposed to allow the operation of a short-term rental, vacation rental. Proposed use does not conflict with NFK 2050. Zoning is SF10, single-family 10. All vacation rentals in this district require a CUP regardless of bedroom count. Here's a picture of the site. Under the current owner, the site did operate as a homestay under a previous administrative permit that was from December 2022 to 2024 with no issues. The property owner now has moved and wishes to operate as a vacation rental. The property will be self-managed, and the only improvement we're going to request is some additional screening shrubs kind of in between the smaller shrubs. For the neighbor analysis, within 500 feet, 74% of parcels are single-family and 76% of residential units are single-family. If approved, 1% of residential parcels and 1% of residential units within 500 feet would be short-term rentals. Any questions?
Oh, go ahead. No, I'm still formulating the question.
She's moving within Norfolk, or?
That was my question.
So the agent is going to be the emergency contact person. She lives within 20 minutes. She can comply with that. I believe the applicant is moving within Norfolk, but I can double check on that.
Right, so the agent would be the main one?
Correct.
Okay.
And she also helped with the administrative homestay as well. That's both their experiences in that. And for the last one, this is a development certificate for the James Barry Robinson Home for Boys Trust. Address for this is 443 Kempsville Road. This is northeast of the I-264 and I-64 interchange, west of Kempsville Road. And the proposal is to allow a development certificate for the construction of a new building within the Barry Robinson Center campus. NFK 2050 designates the site as innovation and production. Institutional is a primary use. The zoning is INC, institutional campus. A development certificate is required for new principal structures and substantial improvements in this district. So here's a map. It is quite large of a site. I do want to let you know where that red dot is, where that new building is going to be. It's just one building. The building is not visible from the ramp or Kempsville Road. And just as some background, the Barry Robinson Center provides education, boarding, and residential treatment programs for military-connected youth. I'm going to turn it over to Faith for the ARB items.
So this is another item that hasn't been to ARB yet, but it's scheduled for the 24th. So here's the site plan of the proposed training facility. And just a note, the parking number shown on the left of the building is inaccurate. There's just going to be 2 parking spots there. And then here's the proposed building. It's a 1-story building that will have a gable roof and brick cladding with a main body brick and then an accent brick. And the bricks will be laid in a Flemish bond that will match the original 1930s campus building. And this design is compatible with the overall character of the campus, so we don't anticipate any issues. And then here's the material palette. There also will have 6/6 windows, which is also consistent with the 1930s buildings. And then here's the site plan with the correct number of parking.
Any further questions for me? Okay.
Did anyone identify anything for the consent agenda?
The Robinson Center? Fact that there's no waivers required.
So that does mean that this would be the last time it's presented, it wouldn't go to city council.
Probably offered to be presented just for the record, that's all.
Okay.
We luck out on the short agenda as well.
All right, director's comments.
City Council has been on their break for the most part. They did have one meeting to discuss the potential sales tax to add it as a referendum for school funding, for school construction funding and CIP funding. The key thing I do want to discuss is we're running up to October, which will be a longer meeting schedule rather than having a separate day for the retreat, as we discussed when we set the calendar. As staff, we are having trouble coming up with items for the retreat because a lot of the things that we would bring to a retreat would have been the items we have to present because we have a deadline to get them adopted. So the cannabis changes, the development changes, the data center issues, what we'll bring to you in September, which is the Faith and Housing Act that was passed that circumvents some of the zoning requirements. We have to bring that to you earlier because we have to get that in place before that shows up, before October, so you'll get that presentation in September. So we're having trouble to come up with a retreat agenda, so if there's anything you'd like to have us dive into, to bring to you for a long discussion with the retreat, we'll gladly look into it for you.
You want suggestions now or you want to?
I was thinking homework, let's maybe think about it and maybe pop in the email items that we think we wanna get into a deep conversation about.
And I'll ask again at the public hearing date too, just to keep it at the top of the list. The commission knows you're in the midst of this with us. We've done a lot of zoning text amendments and a lot of amendments that require a lot of outreach and stuff. So we're working hard to try to keep meeting your expectations as well as the communities and councils. But we're grabbing on for dear life at the moment. We're kind of holding on by our fingernails. But we really don't want to fall behind on trying to stay in front of things. We like to try to continue to be in front of issues. So if there's anything that comes up, we just like to see what's on your mind and research it for you, do the appropriate things.
Thank you. Any comments from the commissioners?
You know, I always have something.
I'm glad you do.
Kind of to Mr. Tahan's question, and also in relation to our short-term rental decision that we're gonna vote on next meeting. I've already heard other civic leagues discussing, should they come next and start applying for an overlay. So I think it would be helpful for us to kind of talk about and maybe look at what we're approving for Willoughby. What's the portability of that, applicability, whatever term you want to use, for other civic leagues? Because we may get those emails before we even approve this one, so I wouldn't be surprised. So just to the point about trying to get ahead of things, I think that would be maybe something for the retreat, if not before.
Any other comments? All right, hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.